We all pot down here. We all pot down here.
That boy is about to seek revenge over the town that murdered him. He knows this, he says, because he himself is the heir apparent to that throne of terror so long held by the likes of Voorhees, Myers, and Kruger. This man's name is Leslie Vernon.
Welcome to We All Pod Down Here. I'm Dan.
And I'm Brittany.
And today we're going to talk about Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. This came out in 2006.
And just a quick overview. This is a mockumentary where our favorite slashers are real. So we follow Taylor, who is working on a documentary for her degree. I believe she's in grad school, and she has her cameramen helping her. Their names are Todd and Doug.
Wait a minute, so you're telling me our favorite slashers aren't real?
Maybe. Anyway, they're going to be interviewing and following the process of our next up-and-coming slasher. His name is Leslie Vernon, as obviously stated before. We're going to do a real deep dive of this movie, so this might be a little bit of a longer episode. There is a lot of Easter eggs. There's a lot of trivia to go over. So I say let's just go ahead and get into it.
Yeah, there's a lot of content in this that is a real hat tip to a lot of things. There's more Easter eggs than I've seen in my lifetime in this, so it's really cool. Alright, so let's take a look at the cast and crew. So the director is Scott Glosserman, who's also one of the writers. He hasn't done a whole lot outside of this movie from what I've seen. The writer is David J. Stevie, and he has a couple upcoming projects. This is the main thing he's known for. He also has a couple things in relation to this universe, which we'll talk about a little later. So the cast is, of course, Leslie Vernon / Leslie Mancuso is played by Nathan Basil. Taylor Gentry is played by Angela Goethals, who her big claim to fame is being one of Kevin McAllister's older sisters in Home Alone. And in a couple of scenes in this movie, too, it's actually a really cool little hat tip, is that you can see that her mittens have the same pattern as Kevin's hat in Home Alone. Kind of cool, right? And so Doc Holleran is played by Robert Englund. If you don't know who he played,
Why are you listening?
right? Freddy Krueger, obviously. Kelly is played by Kate Miner. She's billed as Kate Lang Johnson. And she plays Tammy Tamietti in Shameless. Very good show. Eugene is played by Scott Wilson, who is such a wonderful actor, such a delight. He played Herschel Green on The Walking Dead, and a doctor at the beginning of The Host. He was in Young Guns 2, Exorcist 3, The Last Samurai, The Ninth Configuration. Really long list of credits for him. He's fantastic. Mrs. Collingwood is played by the amazing Zelda Rubinstein, who is Tangina from the Poltergeist movies, and sadly this movie here is her last movie, but she puts in one heck of a good performance. Jamie is played by Bridget Newton. Doug is played by Ben Pace. Lauren is played by Chrissy Carlson. Todd is played by Britton Spellings, and he had a moment in the U.S. The Office show as the casino night craps dealer. It was a pretty cool little scene there. Shane is played by Hart Turner, and Dr. Mueller is played by Travis Zurini. I hope I said that right. If I didn't, I apologize. He was in Cabin Fever as Sheriff Lincoln, and he does a lot of production design. He's worked on a lot of stuff. And the next two credits are kind of funny. Stone Guy is played by Teo Gomez, and slightly more Stone Guy is played by Matt Bolt. No other credits for either of those two gentlemen. It might be some of the best credit descriptions ever.
Right.
Virgin Girl is played by Jennifer Brown, and a really awesome cameo, which I totally marked out on. The guy at the Elm Street house is Kane Hodder, who is Jason Voorhees in 4 of the sequels of Friday the 13th. He was Victor Crowley in Hatchet 1, 2, and 3. He's phenomenal.
I still love when we first started watching this, and I saw immediately, like, while we're watching it, you just say, you're like, is that Kane Hodder? Mm-hmm. And, like, we had to pause it.
Right away. He's a really big guy. Like, comic convention in Pittsburgh, Steel City Con, which is such a great con. I miss it. He's been there a couple times, and like just in awe of how big that guy is. He's huge. Could be a wrestler.
I was gonna say he wasn't a wrestler though.
No,
was
he wasn't. But he's a tall guy.
So let's get into the plot summary. So initially we have our cold open. We just see a girl. She's taking out the trash behind the restaurant she works at, and in a very Michael Myers style situation, we see someone in the bushes, but when she turns, they're gone.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's
so
like
immediately going with the homages. Like,
like questioning, like, wait, did I really see that?
yeah. So she goes to take a closer look. The door slams, and she runs around to the front. We jump to our main character, Taylor Gentry. She's being filmed very much. This reminds me of like when we just reviewed April Fool's Day, where we have the handheld cameraman, a smaller screen, and apparently they're in Glen, Maryland. So, of course, as I've said before, I'm from Maryland, so I'm going to have to nerd out for a few minutes. So.
Yay, Maryland!
Yes, stop it. I was saying yay, and then you said Maryland and ruined it.
I had to.
I know.
It's my job.
I had, the reason Dan does that to me is because one day at work I had someone refer to it as Maryland, and I was torn apart. Now
So, of course, I referred to it as Maryland ever since.
Yes. Anyway, so Glen, Maryland, this is actually a small town. For fellow Marylanders, I will say MoCo. For those that are not from Maryland, it's Montgomery County. This is like right next to Bethesda, which Bethesda is, of course, for the video game fans, that's right where Bethesda's headquarters is in Bethesda, Maryland. And this is about less than 30 minutes from Rockville, which is where I was born. So this is also where the writer and director, Scott Glosserman, he grew up right around this area. I believe he grew up right in Bethesda. I know I read he was born there, so I assume he grew up right around that area. So he obviously has affinity for the area, which everyone from Maryland always like latches on to the fact we're from Maryland. So
it's all about the flag.
It partly is, yes. We have the best flag. I will fight anyone to the death on that. But so his production company is called Glen Echo Entertainment. And if you look, there's a carousel that you'll see, like, of course, when the movie opens and they show all the credits for, the sponsors and whatnot. So the logo for his production company is Glen Echo Park's Carousel, which this is a carousel that was built in 1921. So this year it's exactly 100 years old.
Wow.
Yes, fun facts. And
Centennial. That's
yes.
cool.
And then, so the area that was originally an amusement park, it was actually closed down in 1968, and then it went into disrepair. It's also rumored to be haunted. And most of that area was actually restored in the early 2000s, and it's like an arts and cultural center now. But the carousel is still there, and it can still be ridden. And with that, I will stop nerding out about Maryland and get back to the movie.
I want to check this carousel out next time
one of
we're
these
up there
days when we're down
visiting
there,
family or something.
I say down there. We're down in Florida. When we're up in Maryland, we should go.
That would be cool. So we learned that the classic slashers are real. Right, yes. So Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, in this universe, all real people, all things that happened. I love this so much because it's like, okay, so this is how we're kind of grounding this universe. And a fun trivia fact is when they're on Elm Street, like we mentioned earlier, they try to speak to a man going into house number 1428, which we mentioned before. It's Kane Hodder. 1428 is, of course, Nancy's house from the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and featured in many, many of the sequels. It's been also hinted that it was Freddy Krueger's house, but as far as I know, never really confirmed.
Yeah, I don't think it ever was confirmed. It's just been heavily hinted at throughout the movies.
And it's one of those, like, many, many, many instances in this movie of showing, like, the attention to detail in the homages and the hat tips and stuff like that. You know, they got the house number and everything, and it's a really cool thing to pick out. So, Taylor begins to tell the story of a boy from 20 years ago that was supposed to be possessed by evil, and the town threw him over a waterfall, which was where he died, and he's back for revenge. So we're kind of getting into a little bit of the backstory of the character we're going to be focusing on in this movie. Fun fact here, Taylor is outside the Red Rabbit Lounge. Does that ring any bells? So it should, because you remember back to the original Halloween movie, Dr. Loomis finds the Red Rabbit Lounge matchbook that Nurse Marion Chambers had. So technically, it's also a strip club where Deborah Myers worked in Rob Zombie's Halloween remake from 2007, but we'll ignore that one.
Yeah, that's not a good remake.
No. How can you turn Dr. Loomis into, like, the evil guy?
Yeah, and it's like, it's too much like of, like, let's feel bad for Michael Myers. I'm like, I don't feel bad for Michael Myers.
Like Dr. Loomis was the guy that was the glue of this franchise. Like, he's the one who kind of kept the narrative. He's trying to stop him.
Yeah.
And he's the one who made some of those kind of overlooked sequels fit and entertaining.
Yeah, so it's just...
Donald Pleasance is a legend. And they kind of just crapped on his legacy, I think, in that movie.
Yeah, it's like... I like the idea of, like, more backstory for Michael Myers. Like, with the end scene, like, where his mom worked and all this other stuff. I'm fine with that part. I'm not fine with all of the other, like, let's feel bad for Michael Myers. Like, no.
Sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
And I think the more... you don't need to uncover the shroud too much on Michael Myers, but that's a whole discussion for another day.
Yeah. Jumping back into the story here. So now we jump from the smaller frame view of the documentary to just what's happening. So basically it appears that we're still looking through the documentary cameras, but with full screen, and basically just what's happening outside the documentary is kind of what we're seeing in various parts. So they're knocking on the door trying to find where obviously Leslie lives. They can't find him. They keep thinking they see stuff in the windows, and then Leslie pops out to startle them.
I love that. He just kind of just appears.
Yeah, and this is where, because I went into this movie totally blind, I had no idea what he was going to look like. It really threw me off because, you're expecting, like, the standard, like, the big Michael Myers, like, like the way Kane Hodder's, as Jason Voorhees looks like this bigger character. And he's just kind of this, like, scrawny kid. Like,
yeah, just this kind of normal-looking dude.
Which I loved. I loved that they did that.
He kind of has, like, a charm to him.
Yeah.
He's a really charming guy.
Yeah, for sure. In some ways, kind of gives me almost like a Ted Bundy vibe.
A little bit,
because
he's really affable, gets along with everyone he comes into contact with.
Not what you're expecting. I love that it's like...
Seems like an incredibly down-to-earth, friendly guy, but you start seeing little hints.
Tendencies.
Yeah, he's definitely got some tendencies.
So we go into his house, he's kind of showing them around. We get to meet his turtles, and he shows them, and he says their names are Church and Zoe. So this is supposed to clearly be a reference to Pet Sematary 1 and 2, but I'm just going to point out that Church is the name of the cat that dies in the first movie, but in the second movie, the dog that dies is not named Zoe, it's Zowie. So it's Zowie.
Interesting.
So I just immediately, I always love the name Zowie, and when he said that, I'm like, wait, no, it's Zowie, not Zoe.
And this is, of course, the part where we really start getting a feel of some of the dark humor that'll be in this flick. Leslie has a good line where he says that he's terrible with pets, and the little bastards just won't die. And he only keeps pets that he can eat.
I laughed at that. I was like, of fucking course.
Of course. Well, I mean, turtle soup.
Oh, dear.
It's kind of getting Shredder vibes here. So, of course, he gives the group for the documentary a tour of the house. He shows them, some of his books, and he starts doing some general card tricks, and you're really getting a feel of this guy's personality. He seems, not he came off as a little reserved, but he's kind of opening up a little bit, and the card tricks are cool, and they're like just having a good chat, having a good time, and he seems like just this really nice, down to earth guy, which is exactly why you always gotta be careful, because you never know who might be in that job. And so they begin a very standard interview with him, and he starts referencing other past killers, like slasher killers, like he goes like Mike, Freddy, Chucky. The point is not how they did it, but why they did it, and I really liked that line.
Yeah, because that's what Taylor's asking about. It's basically how they do what they do, and it's not how, it's why.
Mm-hmm. Though we definitely do get in the how, and the how
is
why, and the why. But the how and the why is brilliant, and it's a really good setup for this movie too, because it kind of introduces what we're really going to be diving into. So now we head over to an old farmhouse, and there's more about the legend behind him, or behind all the creepy, horrible backstory. So there was some local kids on the death anniversary date every year. They dare each other to spend the night in the old farmhouse. His plan this year, he's going to reappear, and the house is currently in a trust. Yeah,
because apparently he says I guess this is his family home, but that it's been put in a trust, and if he came forward, he could claim it. And I'm just like, he turns the power on though, and I'm like, who the fuck is paying this electrical bill?
Maybe he is under an alias.
Well, we know he's under an alias,
Of
but...
course, but, like, you know, he's...
Oh, he's paying... I see what you're saying.
It's like he's paying it under an alias, so, like, he's funding this, so he has his stage
But what is
ready.
his job? Where is his money coming from? Because, again, he says this isn't a trust, but, again, we find out, you know, because, again, spoilers, obviously, that later on that we find out that a lot of this isn't, like, really his story. He's taken, like, the story just to run with it when it's really not even his. So it just really starts throwing stuff through a loop. But basically he goes into telling them, you know, what the steps are for this. So step 1 is basically an anchor for the legend, is what he goes into. He takes them to the apple orchard, says, like, on the harvest moon, if you till the soil will come up wet with blood. You'll hear his mother hanging in the trees. And he's like, it gets real quiet. And he's like, listen, like, as if you're going to actually hear the mother. And he's like, just kidding, it's not a harvest moon. We still got a month to go. Like, it's so lighthearted in a lot of this.
He's got a lot of humor, this guy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just like it keeps throwing you off a bit.
I
kind
of want to hang out with this dude. You know,
I know.
It's like the kind of guy you want to have over for pizza and watch a bunch of bad movies.
Yeah, bad horror movies, perhaps. But yeah, so basically, then we come into the next scene. The next day, he's exercising. He's doing a lot of cardio. He's like, "You have no idea how much cardio you gotta do. Yeah, how hard it is to you gotta like run and without getting winded, but still make it look like you're just walking while everyone else is just sprinting."
I love these little details. I love it so much. It's like, of course they need good cardio. I mean, these guys are running after these screaming victims all the time, and somehow they're always on their trail, but they're never moving as fast.
Yeah, so it's just like, it's perfect.
It's
so.
impressive. It's like, of course he's got to do cardio.
Of course.
So now we're moving on to step 2, which is find your target group. They use the example of a school there across the street and like a coffee shop, kind of just observing. And Taylor says, target group, you mean victims? And Leslie goes, potato, potato.
Yeah, victims, you know, same thing.
Yeah, same thing. Leslie says, you don't just wake up one day and pick a girl to start stalking. You need a good supporting cast. You need a survivor girl. She's a virgin. How do you know she's a virgin? You just kind of know. And this group was just an example. He says he already has a girl picked out in Glen Echo. So he has his girl.
And you think that, again, spoilers, but you think at this point is where Taylor would realize there's a problem. Because, again, as we've established, there will be spoilers. Please, for the love of God, if you don't want this spoiled, go pause this now and go watch it. But so we find out at the end that Taylor is the virgin. So if she's a virgin, he says he can just know that someone's a virgin. Then how the fuck would you not be like, oh, this isn't good. Like, this is a problem. But I digress. Some fun trivia for this part. In the background, we see some girls playing jump rope. They're in white dresses, so this is clearly a reference to Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yay, hat tips.
Yes, exactly. This movie is completely filled with, you know, references, Easter eggs, however you want to call it.
Delightful.
Yeah, so it's like if you pay really close attention, you'll see stuff constantly. So you see them playing jump rope, you know, just like they were in Nightmare on Elm Street singing the song about Freddy. And then Leslie brings them to meet his actual final girl, Kelly Curtis. So this is kind of... Yeah. And then, so this is clearly, I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis, you know, that's immediately think when you hear Curtis, but her sister in real life is actually named Kelly Curtis. So, again, if you know, the more you know, the more fun this movie becomes. Mm-hmm. But basically, Leslie makes it clear that to them, no one can speak to Kelly because they want to do an interview with her, and he's like, absolutely not. No one can.
He freaks out.
Yeah, he's like no.
Like he's just big load of nope.
So immediately you're like, well, they're clearly going to ruin this and break this rule.
Yeah, and he's like, he becomes a tad unhinged at that point because he's been really chill until now. He's like, no, you cannot talk to her.
Under no circumstances.
He's a focused guy. He's a motivated guy. So on to step 3 of his plan, the flyby. So this is where we see what happened in the cold open of the movie. There's a brick that props open the door she has, and there's clear fishing line. So he pulls it out. So he makes it look like the door is just closing.
Yeah, and it's like, the way I looked at this myself, so I was like, it's like behind the scenes of a magic show of death.
Right? He's like pulling up the curtain of how to do all these tricks to scare the bejesus out of somebody.
And then kill them.
Exactly. So we see the group getting back into a van, and we see someone heading towards the building. Leslie is very spooked at this point. And I assume this is the character of Doc Holleran kind of making their first unannounced appearance, which of course is the famous Robert Englund. And now we head over to meet Leslie's two best friends. One of the best scenes in this movie. And his best friends are Eugene and his wife Jamie. We learn very quickly that Eugene is retired from the biz, but he's an old pro. So they make it out that he's an ex-slasher who is retired now.
So, obviously Jamie is a reference to Jamie Lee Curtis, but it's never really said who Eugene is, but I've read in some interviews that it's supposed to be Billy from the original Black Christmas. And there's actually an earlier version of the script where they hinted at it more clearly that it's Billy, but it's not really established in this. But just keep that under your hat knowing that this is Billy from Black Christmas.
And if you've never seen Black Christmas, see it.
Yes,
it's
great.
Great.
Stop what you're doing and go watch it.
It's
amazing.
Absolutely great. Fantastic. Classic film. So as they walk up to the house, you'll see a 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 88 parked outside. This is the car that is featured in every one of Sam Raimi's movies. Raimi calls it the classic. If you also look in the rear deck, you'll see a toolbox. I think we all know what those things were used for at some point. And Jamie says that she keeps forgetting to get Eugene out of the tank. So what the hell are they talking about the tank? Apparently, it's a sensory deprivation chamber, and they are legitimately digging up from looks like almost like a grave, but it looks like a weird metal tube that they're just digging him out of. This is a really cool scene.
And I've read somewhere that there's actually like a real coffin they use, but I don't know if that's true because it didn't look too much like a coffin to me. But that's what I read.
Like a modified one, probably.
Yeah, but so Leslie says that that you got to keep control of your body. He's like, like yoga people do. They can like slow their heartbeat to 4 beats per minute.
Foreshadowing.
And apparently, Eugene's been down there for 3 fucking days.
This is impressive.
Yeah, so we jump back. Jamie's making dinner. She says, how they support Leslie. She just wishes he'd chosen a safer career. So it's like, it's like they're talking about him joining the military or something.
It's like she's so like, it's almost like he's their like long forgotten son, like their son or something,
Yeah, or like the neighborhood boy that they just kind of like always were real close with.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I wish he would have picked out something a little safer, don't you know?
Why was she suddenly from Minnesota?
I don't know, but it fits. It fits. It's like, it's such a mom thing to do, and it's really cool. And I have to say, this whole scene is fantastic. They're making the business of mass murder such a passed down through the generations kind of situation. It also tries to make it all so really logical, like it's this inherited business, and it puts this whole real world kind of ethos on it, and it's really cool. And another fun bit here in this scene where they're making dinner and everything, Eugene goes to chop carrots, and he chops them incredibly fast.
Well, first he does it really slowly when he's just like telling them about his like backstory a bit.
Yeah, but he tells them about his success in the 60s and 70s, and how much killing without the prep work of today, and he gets annoyed, and this is when he starts talking about hacks or just one-hit wonders, hitting a sorority, getting killed or arrested. And is this a reference to somebody we know?
Yeah, so I assume it's, again, the reference to Billy from Black Christmas, since, again, that's hitting a sorority house, but I also wonder if in some ways this was like a Ted Bundy reference, because right before he got caught at FSU, he hit the Chi Omega sorority house, and that was on January 15th, 1978, and then he kills Kimberly Leach, who's a 7th grader, on February 9th, 1978 as well. But then he's captured, of course, a month later on February 15th, 1978. So basically, even though he's not the one-hit wonder, I still felt like, he hit the sorority and then he gets arrested. The sorority made him fuck up kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's kind of referencing that, this guy was a hack. Yeah. Hack, good term.
Ha.
And he says it cheapens it. And then this is when it zooms in and he's rapidly cutting the carrots. And they are now brunoise. And Eugene says, Jay, Fred, and Mike worked really, really hard.
And again, I love how they keep referring to them like they're like old pals at the bar. Like,
I imagine
buddies,
like the poker poker dogs, but you have all these people at the table.
The murder dogs.
The murder dogs, yeah. It's like the Ted Lasso with like the diamond dogs. The murder dogs. Woof, woof. It's almost like Cheers for psychopathic mass murderers or something. Like where everybody knows your name.
Yeah, that fits.
It's another way to kind of spin it. Like you have like Mike and Jay. They're like Norm and everything.
Yeah, Norm. Oh, Norm.
I mean, Cliff was a ticked off postal worker, so I mean.
Well, I was thinking we said Norman. I was thinking like Norman Bates.
No, like Norm on Cheers.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But I was like, oh, this.
But you could also substitute Norm. Yeah,
we should make that
so
I should
funny.
Get better at art and make that a shirt.
That'd be cool. And he states that they again talking about their buddies, the murderers, how they became legends by returning like a curse over and over again, and that changed the whole business. So. Again, they he was ranting on one-hit wonders and stuff like that. So coming back over and over again, so making people anticipate it is what really revolutionized things.
Yeah, and then I love how Taylor goes the business of supernatural killing sprees.
And this is one of the best lines in the movie coming up. Eugene explains, and he says this very seriously, and he says, "No, the business of fear. For good to be pitched against evil, you have to have evil."
I just love that line, though. It's so perfect. Like, basically, like, it's almost like, we're doing God's work here. Without evil, you'd have no good.
Yeah, you don't have the contrast. You don't have the yin and yang. And that set of lines stuck with me probably more so than any others in the movie. Could not have been delivered any better by Scott Wilson. He's a legend.
Yeah. So we jump back to them just sitting in the living room. Jamie's preparing a doggy bag for them to, with the dogs.
Yeah, right.
Preparing the doggy bag for them to, just like their food that they had for dinner. Now, if you look really carefully, kind of look at the side table that's between Leslie and Eugene, you're going to see the laminate configuration puzzle box from Hellraiser.
Great little nod, hat tip. And then we get to a point where Eugene asks Leslie about his red herring. This is really important. He says she spends a lot of time at the library. So they said, maybe you knock off a friend. Eugene says, no, that's not a good idea. Jamie suggests the librarian, maybe. And Leslie explains what a red herring is here, which is a preliminary strike that indirectly involves the final girl.
I'm just looking at Taylor like, aren't you a journalist in grad school? How don't you know? Like,
she was really confused.
Like, how does she not know what a red herring is?
And so then we jump to them arriving at the library. And Leslie shows an article about the suspect that was questioned in his mom's rape. He says it's her great uncle. So Taylor comments on how much the picture looks like Kelly, and Leslie says it's actually a computer-generated image, and she doesn't have a great uncle that he knows of. So he's kind of planting the seeds here. So they go.
How it's like so perfect though. Like that always happens in the movies though, where it's like, oh look, and it's like it looks so much like her, and he's like, oh yeah, no, it's just a computer generated. Yeah. It's like of course, like it's just again.
I just edited this, and yep, it's all good. So they get into where they're sneaking into the library. So they go in through the back. And Leslie puts this newspaper clipping where she can find it. He wants to make sure she can find it. And a fun little note here that we can see behind Leslie, there are books about fire and combustion, which will absolutely come into play later in this story. And Leslie explains how he switched out the microfiche and the next stage of the plan if everything goes correctly. So we're moving on to the next part of the plan. He is a happy guy.
Yeah. So basically, assuming that she finds the paper, she's going to go to the microfiche, and then she's going to see, the full article. And he's just so giddy about it. He's just, like, jumping. He's like, oh boy. And, like, I heard at one point he, like, grabs from behind it. For whatever reason, Paradise Lost is with the fire and combustion novel. So he's just, like, he grabs it, and he's just like, Paradise Lost, found it. I got a kick out of that scene.
It's like in Seinfeld when George Costanza's all happy because I'm busting, Jerry, I'm busting.
There you go. You got your Seinfeld reference in.
Did-do. And, like, the joys of premeditated murder. He's so freaking happy. And the planning and the roadmap and how they actually make this all work in a real-world setting and make it really logical. This perspective is one of the things for me that really makes this movie work and makes it tick.
And at this point, we see that apparently Doug was staying in the van, so it's only Todd and Taylor and Leslie that went inside. And he sees someone pulling up the building. He's just like, who is that? But then we jump, and again, it's going to be, obviously, Doc Halloran. So Kelly, of course, finds the article, goes to the librarian, and wouldn't you know it, the librarian is our amazing Zelda Rubinstein.
It made us both so happy.
I know, it's like, Tangina! In this, her name is Mrs. Collingwood, though. Now, sadly, as we said earlier, Zelda passed away in 2010, so this is her last movie, but again, I absolutely loved her in this, so she's just so perfect.
Yep, darn fine performance for sure. And Collingwood could also be a reference to Mary Collingwood and her parents from Last House on the Left.
Yeah, it's just like one letter different, so it's instead of Collinwood, it's Collingwood in Last House on the Left. But again, if that's not a reference, then I don't know what is.
For sure. And when she talks, she uses her kind of classic voice from Poltergeist and tells the story in a very similar style.
It's so perfect. Like, I was like giddy watching this.
Oh my god. It's one of the most memorable scenes in this movie, I think. And it's all because of Zelda.
So she takes her to check the microfiche for the rest of the article. Now, there's a slight plot flaw in this. So if you watch, when they're looking at the article, it says Glen Echo, Oregon instead of Maryland. And so, because the filming actually took place in Oregon, so I'm guessing that's where this got messed up. But I was like, no, Maryland, damn it.
If it's not Maryland, it's nothing.
Yeah, it's wrong.
So Zelda starts telling the story of the Vernon boy, but tells Kelly, nah, it's just a story. But Kelly really wants to know. So Zelda points her back to the microfiche that they planted, and Kelly starts to read aloud about the photo of Mr. and Mrs. Vernon on their wedding day. And Zelda says that they were strange, and that's the only photo you'll find. And then she tells the tale that Molly Vernon gave birth to a bastard son 9 months after, quote-unquote, that night.
And when we say that night, this is the only part I was a little unclear on. I'm assuming that we're referring to the rape that supposedly happened, that Mrs. Vernon got raped by Kelly's great uncle. And I'm assuming it's that and not referring to the marriage itself, like the marriage night, because since that's supposed to be the only photo, it was bizarre. But Zelda goes on to tell how Leslie was horribly abused. He was forced to live in the cider house. He was driven like a slave to till the fields with only a hand scythe. And that the legend has it that beneath a blood-red harvest moon that the boy murdered Silas, which is not clear in this, but I'm assuming that was his dad, or his quote-unquote dad, like since he's a bastard son, and then hanged his mother in the apple orchard. And when the town people discovered this, they bind him, like his hands and legs, and threw him over the falls, which, again, side note here, Glen Echo is basically right on the Potomac River. But in that area, there's not really any waterfalls. Like, there are parts, like, if you go in different parts of Potomac, but that part of the Potomac River doesn't really have any waterfalls in it. But I digress. So, Kelly asks if they ever found his body, and of course Zelda says that with the water being cold, the bodies don't come up, and that the turtles picked his bones clean.
The turtles.
Yeah, but this is actually cool. This is a fun fact. Cold water is actually where bodies don't resurface, so they don't decompose, they just kind of float to the bottom and stay there because they can't release the gases that would cause them to resurface normally. And it's also funny because he has pet turtles. So
it's another...
It's all coming around. It's all coming together.
Yep, just building up. And then this is the point, of course, where Kelly puts the pieces together that she'd be related to this body, but Zelda's just like, no, you have nothing to worry about. But of course, there's Leslie in a creepy mask right behind Zelda, and he whips out the scythe. But Robert Englund miraculously shows up right behind him with a guy and says, Leslie, no more, it ends here. And Zelda seems to fall to the ground dead, but we don't really see any blood, so we're really not 100% sure she's actually dead. And this is, business is picking up here. So Doc Holleran...
Business is picking up, that's perfect.
Mm-hmm. And Doc, it's totally ripped off from Jim Ross in wrestling.
I didn't realize.
But it fits. And so Doc Holleran shoots at him, but Leslie dodges it. and Kelly sees him jumping around the top of the bookcases. Doc Halloran shoots a few times more, but of course he just misses him. And a fun fact, this seems like a really good time to point out how much Doc Halloran reminds us of Dr. Loomis from Halloween. It's just about a one-to-one thing, and I'm sure that's where they were going.
Oh, it's 1,000% intentional.
And
if it wasn't,
it's
I'd
perfect.
be shocked.
It's absolutely perfect, and Robert Englund plays this up masterfully.
It's perfect. And also, kind of another fun thing, I read that Doc Halloran's supposed to be a combo of Danny's nickname from The Shining, where they call him Doc. Mm-hmm. And then the chef that we meet at the beginning of The Shining that's talking to Danny, explaining The Shining to him, is Dick Halloran. So the name's spelled slightly differently, again, kind of like with Collingwood, that it's just got one less N, but again, if this isn't an homage, I don't know what is.
Oh, it absolutely is. And then now we're back outside after the whole shootout in the library, and Leslie and Taylor are just going nuts. And they start yelling, "We got an Ahab!" Which Leslie quickly explains is the guy back there, which is obviously Doc Holleran. And they get back to Jamie and Eugene's house, so and they show them the video, and Leslie explains he was wearing a vest so the shot didn't hurt. I'm sure he felt it a little bit, but...
Yeah, from everything I've heard, when you get shot with a bullet, even if you have a bulletproof vest on, it still hurts like a motherfucker.
Yeah. But then again, this guy... He's so giddy at this point. This guy's probably full of adrenaline, so maybe he really didn't.
True.
And,
for now.
Yep. And Leslie explains that Doc Holleran is a psychiatrist who visited him when he was a little boy, but after Leslie got away, Doc Holleran always thought he'd come back.
Very Halloween vibes here. Now we go into, we want to know what an Ahab is, and instead of just the guy back there, Leslie goes into a better definition and explains that an Ahab is a representation of all that is good, and that they're going to protect others against evil no matter what the cost. Now, what's kind of cool is I kind of dove into this probably more than most people would, but so I see this more as a person that would go after what they perceive to be bad, because in Moby Dick, which I'm going to take a moment to always laugh at the fact that sperm whale is named Moby Dick, because I'm a child.
A sperm whale named Dick. Wow.
I know, but apparently Moby Dick's actually named after a real white sperm whale that was called Mocha Dick, which was killed in 1838. As far as we can tell from records, there was about up to 100 whalers that had failed to kill him. But apparently he was really docile until, someone attacked him, which, again, I'm like, so here's a great fucking idea. Leave the damn whale alone.
Right? Why are they trying to hurt this poor, innocent, docile creature? Oh, because it looks different, so immediately I have to kill it.
Yeah, I think it's then became, of course, the idea of, no one could kill it. People tried and they failed. To me, it really bothered me. So apparently I read some things where they said that when they finally did kill it, it was, had all these harpoons stuck in it. And I'm like, this poor creature.
Right.
But anyway, so back to the book, though, of, Moby Dick. Captain Ahab gets his leg bitten off by Moby Dick, and then he dies trying to kill him. So it's not so much about protecting others with no regards for your own safety, but rather being so focused on your obsessions that you'll do anything, even putting yourself and others in danger to complete your goal. So that was my take on it. Again, thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
And I think that's a really good take, and it kind of goes into Doc Holleran / Dr. Loomis kind of thing, is where they will do anything to protect others from evil, but it also kind of becomes an obsession.
Yeah.
It absolutely is an obsession for Dr. Loomis. And it's the same mirrored thing here. And then we jump back into the story. So Taylor decides to talk to Kelly, because there's no way that'll go wrong.
Yeah.
And just warn him, don't do this. And
the killer literally tells you, don't do this, and what do? You do it, of course.
You do it. That's a great idea. You want to tick off the guy who has this elaborate plot of fame and glory. And of course, Doc Holleran is there, comes over and says, why are you following Kelly around? This guy is on it. And he says Leslie's real name is Leslie Mancuso, and he's from Reno, Nevada. Yeah,
so we're quickly figuring out that something's amiss. But let's also take a moment to appreciate that Mancuso is the last name of two famous people in horror. So obviously we have Frank Mancuso Jr., who produced a lot of the Friday the 13th sequels, and also April Fool's Day, which we reviewed as our first episode. Also, Nick Mancuso, he's not credited, but he actually did the voice of Billy in Black Christmas, which, again, circling around to Eugene, supposed to be him. Again, we're all just diving into the references. And there's no relation. I checked if Frank Mancuso Jr. and Nick Mancuso are related. No relation, just happen to have the same last name, so convenient.
Very much so. That was a creepy voice in Black Christmas, too.
Yeah.
is complete madness. And of course, Taylor here is completely frightened and goes to leave without speaking to Kelly. She's like, nope, I'm over this. And Doc Holleran just drops the line, expect to see more of me.
And of course, I like, right when he says that, I'm like, especially in your dreams, Freddy.
Dr. Freddie Holleran.
Dr. Freddie Holleran, Jesus Christ.
And Leslie is pissed. Of course, like you said, he said, don't do this. And he just slams Taylor into the van and tells her, like, this is my life's work. Where's the trust? And, like, it's kind of funny at this point. You're like, yeah, I don't blame the guy. He told you not to do this.
You're
doing this. He allows you into his world to do this documentary about this. When, most of these, classic villains would have never done that. So he's given him all this access, and he's mad. And I get it, because like his plans are really highly threatened by this move. And then Taylor rebuts. She starts telling him off and telling him about not telling the truth, and mentions Reno. So Leslie grabs her throat and slams her in the van, saying, she wins, I'll tell you everything. So now we go back to Leslie's house, and we learn that Leslie is in fact not Molly Vernon's son. He never lived in Glen Echo. Dr. Holleran was just a psychiatrist that he had back in Reno, and he can't turn him in because Leslie filed a restraining order against him, so he'd be arrested for trying to turn him in. They're deciding, like, Taylor decides, okay, I'll stick with you, Leslie. Yeah, there's a real turning point in the
because she's debating at that point, like, should I leave now? Like,
yeah.
Or
like, is this it? Like, am I over this crap? Or are we going to stick through it to the end?
Yeah, so Taylor's sticking with him, and then they fall in love happily ever after. Just kidding. So, obviously that's not what happens.
Unicorns and rainbows.
Yep. And this might be a stretch, but the van that Taylor has is slightly reminded me of the van from the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's a green Ford. This is an off-white Volkswagen. But the front and, like, the lights just, I don't know, it gave me that vibe a little bit.
I get that.
And then, of course, they pull in to tell him they decided to stay with him, and he's driving a Prius, which I just burst out laughing, because I was like, I thought the van was his for some reason, up until this point, and then I was like, no, of course, the serial killer's driving a Prius.
It fits, because, he cares about the environment, as well as, being a butchered psychopath
Of course.
person.
The kind of a funny thing also, if you watch really carefully, the van actually does have Maryland plates, but the Prius has Oregon plates, so, again, slight plot flaw, but I just thought it was funny.
Very good eye. I love how the flick just makes fun of itself.
Oh, for sure.
It's just so cool. And Leslie, now we're getting down to brass tacks. Leslie explains the plan for the night. And this is really great. Like, he really delves into this. And he really thought this through. So he goes into the Code of Ethics.
Which is just funny that there's a Code of Ethics.
Right? It's like, there's a code to this. And it kind of fits. They make this like a fraternal order of supernatural psycho killers. They're passing down generation to generation. Of course, there's kind of a pseudo Code of Ethics. So Leslie says that you can't reach into the closet because it represents the womb. Interesting here. And Taylor asks if he's pro-life, and he just stares her down.
That cracked me up, that part. Like, just the fact that he just stares at her like, what? Why are you even asking
really?
this?
Like, why?
So now we get into the rules. So first we had steps, now we have rules. So rule 1, no one gets away. So basically what he goes into with rule 1 is that he's going to kill a banging couple upstairs to make it look like they're sleeping.
Because there's always one of those.
Yeah, of course. There always has to be with this group of dumb college kids or high school kids. In this case, I guess they're high school kids. But he says, I don't want to, quote-unquote, lose containment. He's like, the lights will go out. There's going to be a couple that goes to the basement, checks the fuse box. The lights are going to go on. He's going to kill the guy. The girl's going to run upstairs screaming into the house. This is going to start the panic. Corpse of this kid that he kills in the basement is going to get put in an unlocked tool shed, and that's going to be to scare whoever goes in there next. He says if anyone, except for Kelly, his final girl, goes in there, they're dead. He's going to kill them. Yep,
and once Kelly goes in there, it's the moment that she's going from victim to heroine. Not the drug.
I was about to say not the drug. You beat me to it.
But the heroine of the group. And so the big hard weapon is apparently a phallic symbol, taking Leslie's manhood.
But it's not a rocket ship?
Really should have given him the cookie.
I hope someone gets that reference.
Watch Death the Smoochie. It's wonderful.
It's not a rocket ship. It's a cock.
It's a cock and ball. God, I love Robin Williams.
Oh my gosh, R.I.P. Mm-hmm. So then Taylor, we kind of jump back to their interview, and Taylor's like, so you're pro-life and you're a chauvinist. And he just, again, stares at her.
He's over this crap, I think, at this
To
point.
some extent, yeah.
Yeah. So we go out to the tool shed. All the weapons have been sabotaged really brilliantly. Like, the head of the axe is set to fall off. And
Yeah, virtually every big weapon he has, like, something where it'll maybe get one swing out of it or one hit, and then it just will
just break.
Yeah.
So he has all the weapons sabotaged, so whatever they grab for, it's not going to be very useful. He's also nailed all the windows shut.
And Taylor goes, why don't they just smash them out?
He says, you'd think so, but you'd be surprised. No, and when they do smash it out, it's on the second floor or higher.
And again, I love how aware this movie is of itself and poking fun at those tropes. It's just absolutely perfection.
Because those tropes always happen.
Yeah, because it's like they always run upstairs. You're like, no, damn it, don't go upstairs. Or then they're
You're
like,
trapping yourself upstairs. You have nowhere to go.
Again, like they can't get out from the first floor, opening the windows. So instead of smashing it out, they'll go upstairs and then either open those windows or actually smash those windows out. And then it's like again, putting themselves in a bad spot. So
making bad decisions in desperate times.
Pretty much. So then we see him cutting down like larger branches, and he says any of the smaller ones are pre-cut, so if they try to climb, they'll break.
Sabotaging everything.
Yeah, the kids' cars are all sabotaged.
Yep.
He says the kids will try to hide in the barn. Doc Halloran's going to show up for the good versus evil showdown. Kelly will run to the apple orchard, which he says is representative of the birth canal. And he refers to this as a yonic imagery, which, again, I've watched it, so I was like, what the fuck is a yonic imagery? But then he explains, because, Taylor doesn't know either, that basically, that this yonic imagery is really important, and that yonic means that it's like the word phallic, but for women. So, we all learned something here.
Very much so. The killer is very educational. And at this point, the plan is Kelly will emerge, reborn, her innocence lost, and she's hell-bent for revenge. Her friends have been killed, she's going to get this killer. So then we cut to Leslie working on a cider press. He's saying, it'll hurt someone tonight. Definite foreshadowing. We go over to Eugene and Jamie. We're doing a bit of a send-off here. They're wishing him luck.
And Taylor's doing like her final interview stuff. She asks, well, how do you survive in these situations?
And Jamie says, never hang out with a virgin.
Which I laughed.
And then Eugene's line's great. He says, run like a motherfucker and don't stop until the sun comes up. He's not wrong.
Exactly. Both of those, it's just like, well, note to self. But
I love Jamie and Eugene.
I know, they're so perfect.
Again, I want to hang out with them.
Yeah. No, they're absolutely perfect. But then so we're back in the murder house.
We're getting ready here.
Yeah, at this point, Leslie's putting on his makeup, and he's also putting on some stuff to prevent bleeding and fire retardant. Basically, it's like jellies made to put all over his face and body.
The preparation.
Yeah. And so Taylor asks Leslie if he loves Kelly, and he says he loves the idea of her. And in the background, you can actually hear Midnight, the Stars, and You, which is sung by Al Boley, and it's with Ray Noble Orchestra. This is from 1934, and this is actually, if you pay close attention, this is what's played at the very end of The Shining. So they're in this last moment together. That was in the house, but now they're up in kind of like the hayloft of the barn. And he's like, this is like his Christmas, and he starts legitimately crying, just happy tears.
Mm-hmm. He is it's like if the kid comes down from their bedroom at Christmas and they unwrap all the tools and plans to murder a bunch of people.
Pretty much. So, was that the Christmas of the Menendez brothers?
Probably.
Again, dark humor. Just going with the theme of the movie here.
Yep. So Leslie comes in through the window into the room that Taylor, Doug, and Todd are waiting in. It shows that he's got some spark plugs out of the cars, and again, we're ready to go, like Beetlejuice. It's showtime. And he says he'll give the couple coming up a bit of time together. It's not a bad way to go out. And Todd's like, awesome, yes.
The way he does that was great.
Right. And you hear and here we go. You hear the couple going at it. Leslie quickly kills them both, but we just hear it and don't see it. Really cool trivia fact here. In the original draft of the script, the movie was going to end here because Stevie felt that we've all seen the slashers and they didn't really need to show it. He wanted to focus on what happened before the slasher, which is an interesting take.
Yeah, definitely an interesting take. I like that they continued on with what happens, but I thought that was a really good, just only what happens before, not the actual slasher itself.
That would have been a really good, surprise ending. Because
Yeah.
you don't expect it to end here.
Yeah, no, I think it would have worked, but I love what they did with it.
Yeah,
so.
I agree. I think they made the right decision to go on.
Yeah, so Taylor and the group, they're obviously a bit shaken by the fact that literally people just got killed. Now the reality, I think, is finally set in
Yep,
these folks.
it's on.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you think about, okay, now you're all shaken up. You've been following this guy around for a while, knowing what he's going to do. You know what he's going to do. And now you're surprised that he actually did it? What, do you think he was joking?
I don't think it's so much that they thought he was joking. I think it's that he was so nice and personable. I think they let their guard down a lot.
They really let their guard down a
Yeah,
lot. Because, again, this guy, the whole concept of this is he wants to be the next big slasher. So the fact that he's actually doing it, you think he was going to have a change of heart? Do you think so?
No, I don't think so much that they thought he would as much as, like I said, I think it's just they were so shocked because it's like, oh God.
Oh, shit.
This is really happening.
People are dead. Think bad things are happening.
So Taylor and the group, they're clearly shaken by this. Leslie forces them outside, says that Taylor has the quote-unquote, we can't just stand here and let this happen look. So he gives them back the mic, tells them to go, like, just leave at this point.
Yeah,
Get out of
at
here.
this point, it's done. And Leslie comes back apologizing and says, this is his night, and he'll either be in hiding, locked up, or dead, one of those things. So let's just say our goodbyes now. Taylor tries to tell them, you've got a choice, and he says he made this choice to be the counterbalance to good. Great line.
Love that line.
So good. And it's like, why does Taylor think he's going to have a change of heart here? Do you really think that's going to happen?
Yeah,
lady?
there's too...
I think she's lost it. Like, legitimately. Like, you're so far out from reality.
Yeah. And at this point, though, the funny thing is when he's talking to her, like, he kept getting closer away. I was like, is he going to kiss her here? Like, are we going with that route? But we didn't. And I love that we didn't because it kind of felt like it would.
Kiss her with a knife.
Yeah, right. So Leslie walks away and Taylor says to pack it up, and they see the lights go out in the house, and Taylor literally says, we cannot just stand here and let this happen. And of course, Todd points out, he's like, that's literally what Leslie said she'd say.
And Taylor turns to the camera and says, this documentary's done. She's over this. And this is when we transition from the documentary cameras that we've been going through this whole film with to just following the group like it's a regular movie. So documentary's done at this point. And this is the first time we actually see Doug and Todd's faces. And they start arguing about, should we go into the house and try to save these kids? And Doug's like, points out, he could come after us, and he's absolutely right. If they interfere, they're going to be in the crossfire. And
of course Taylor says, okay, cool, fine. You guys stand here holding your balls. And she storms off.
Yeah, and Todd says one of his best lines, like, she had to make the fucking balls reference.
I laughed so hard. Of course, at this point, they go into the house now, and somehow this movie, again, becomes even more aware of itself and aware of the trope. So, like, Todd says, this is a bad idea, and immediately says, I don't like that I just said that, given the circumstances.
It's so good, and this movie is about tearing down that fourth wall, and doing it in the most fun way possible.
It's just so perfect.
Yep. And then they find the two stoner guys,
which literally, as we mentioned earlier,
are literally billed as the stoner guys. And they say that Kelly's upstairs. So we hear a slight scream, and the lights come back on. And they walk in on Kelly just bucking bronco on her boyfriend, spinning her bra around over her head. Virgin my ass.
Yeah, I just watched this, and I was like, huh. I was like, so not a virgin. This is where, like, again, I'm usually good at picking out twists and stuff. Did not fucking see this coming at all.
This is when it gets crazy. Crazier,
yeah.
I should say, because it's already gotten crazy.
So they go downstairs, and the lights go out again. The jock in the cellar is dead. Kelly comes back downstairs. They get the group all together in the living room. They explain that Leslie's here to kill him. The stoners, of course, think it's funny.
Of course they do.
I was just like, I love the stoners. They crack me up. So the other girl comes running from the basement. She says Pete's dead, which was, I guess, her boyfriend.
Yeah, Kelly sees Leslie outside the window and faints.
Some final girl.
Right. And Taylor, Todd, and Doug decide to mess up the plan and take the stoners upstairs to see the bodies. So Leslie's at the window. He's lightly drawing his scythe against it to make a really creepy noise. It's a skull. But no bodies.
Yeah, so this throws them off because they, like, wait a minute, the body's supposed to be here. We knew the plan. The plan has changed.
Or was this part of the plan all along?
Yeah, like, tell them what's going to happen because he knew that they were going to come back. So the stoners go to the tool shed. One goes in and finds Leslie, but he thinks he's a scarecrow because, again, they're stoned off their asses, and of course, he did. So when I say he did, the stoner, not Leslie, obviously. So the other one opens the door and gets a post digger to the heart, pulls out his own heart, and lays it in his hand with the post hole digger. And somehow this dude is alive and looks at it. And I'm like, golly ma!
Exactly.
So Taylor and the boys see this, and of course they book it back to the house. They're like, we're done.
Yeah, they're over this. So we're back in the house, and they're, of course, trying to think of a last-ditch plan to figure this out. They run to their van, thinking it's not sabotage. They would be wrong. Of course he sabotaged their van. He knew they weren't going to leave, and he didn't want them to leave, I don't think. So, of course, the dead kid's in the van instead of the bedroom. They find that the van won't start.
Of course. Everything's
gone to hell, and I think for Leslie, everything's going to plan.
Yeah. So we run back to the house. Taylor explains to Kelly that she's supposed to be the survivor girl / final girl. She screams she's sorry she's not a virgin. Of course, the door rattles, scaring them. Kelly breaks the window, and before anyone has a chance to stop her, she goes onto the pre-cut branch and falls to her death. So, final girl's already dead at this point. She's the fourth person to die at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So they look out the window, and of course they see Leslie standing right there. So I don't know how the hell he rattles the door and runs out there just to stand there. Great cardio on this guy.
Right, he's got it down. And I will fully admit, I am totally rooting for Leslie at this point.
You have to.
I like this guy. He's a fun mass murderer. And so Leslie, of course, he's walking towards them while they run to the barn. Cardio, this is where it comes in. He's just walking, they're running, but he's keeping pace. Todd heroically decides to buy them some time. He says, I'll see you around, have a nice summer, and takes off saying, Leslie, no one gets away, rule number 1. Good line. And Doug and Taylor then head to the barn. Todd says, come on, you physical specimen, chase the doughboy. Todd's awesome.
I know, I love Todd so much, I was so sad.
This scene is a little heartbreaking for me, but Todd trips and falls backwards. Leslie's right on top of him. Todd pulls his mask back and says, look at me, man, it's Todd, we're in this together. Leslie takes his mask off and just snaps Todd's neck like a twig. R.I.P. Todd.
Yes, I know, I love Todd, I was sad when he died. But in the barn, we go into the hayloft, which is what Leslie predicted would happen, but he's not up there, which is what he said would be. But again, obviously the plan's changed, or again, the plan he told them is different than what it was. So Taylor tells the remaining girl and guy that, they don't matter, which I was like, that's not the best way to comfort these folks, but okay.
But she's not wrong.
She's not wrong, but it's like, oh, they don't matter. You're just the, fodder, basically, is the way I interpreted that. And I was like, well, shit.
You're not the real target.
Yeah. So Taylor says he knew, he found me before we even shot a frame. And I was like, yep, that's right, folks. This is where we learn Taylor is the virgin. She is the final girl.
Yep, and they did a really nice job of covering this up. When you get to this reveal, you start thinking about, there's some subtle hints about this here and there. And it really adds a satisfying twist that you didn't really see coming. You can predict a lot of these things, and sometimes, but this time they really did a nice job of covering it up.
And I wonder if part of the reason they did such a good job covering up is originally it was supposed to end at that other part, so that they had very limited hints for this.
And it really worked.
Yeah.
It really worked. There's a couple little things that you can kind of say, maybe he's kind of got something else in mind here.
Yeah.
But it's really well done. And they hear a noise at this point. They go running up the hay.
Yeah, they're jumping on top of the hay, and now
they're trying to get away.
I grew up riding horses, and of course we would jump around the hay in the barns and whatnot. And that shit ain't safe. You can really easily fall through those and get stuck, and it's really dangerous because it's so heavy to move.
It's really dense, right?
Yeah, and so you could do it sometimes on kind of the hay bales they were jumping on probably would have been fine, but I was watching.
If it's a tied up tight hay bale, more so than just a big pile, I think would be safer.
Well, no. The tied up ones, the problem is that, especially if it's the round bales, the problem is, we would jump between them, but if you fall down those, if you have them stacked high enough, they're so heavy, they're hard to move. So it's one thing with, the ones they were jumping on, but I'm thinking more the round bales.
Gotcha.
They're, 100-plus pounds each, so,
Sure.
it takes, massive, equipment to move them. So, if you fall down and you're trapped in there, they have to try to move those without actually, doing anything that would cause the others to move onto you.
Ooh.
So I'm watching this and I'm just nope, unsafe.
Yep. And at this point, Doug grabs a shovel, thinking Leslie's coming into the barn.
Nope, it's Doc Halloran, and now they've knocked him out.
Yep, here comes Doc to save the day, and he's unconscious.
Yeah.
And Doug tries to do the smart thing of a double tap, and there's some instances where just double tap. Didn't you see?
There's so many times where you're like, double tap, but this time you're like, no, damn it, don't double tap this time.
Yep. But Taylor stops him, realizing, hey, it's not Leslie. It's not him. Let's not do this. And then the other girl tries to climb the ladder. Taylor tries to stop her. Leslie grabs her. Bye-bye, Lauren. She did. Like an idiot, the other guy, I think the name is Shane.
They didn't really establish his
It
name.
was just kind of like this
him.
part of the teenager group.
He's the part that doesn't matter.
Exactly, he don't matter. But he goes up the ladder. Leslie gets him too. He just hangs him. But he pulls Leslie with him, and he falls from the hayloft and appears to be knocked out.
And Doug and Taylor see this, and yet Doug doesn't think it's a good time to double tap now.
Yep. At this point, Leslie's down and out. Just double tap.
Yeah, like you wanted to double tap Doc Halloran. Now's the time to actually double tap.
Yep. It's like, do you have like double tap anxiety at this point?
Yeah, right. So of course Leslie then sits up real quickly like Michael Myers.
So good.
And I just was like, I love that. So then Taylor started explaining how he's thought of all this, Doug, and Doug is in the most perfect way, again, with the movie being so aware of the tropes and stuff. He's like, help me, quit explaining, which is so perfect, because how many times do you shout that in a horror movie where someone's just explaining what happened? You're like, damn it, you're about to die. Don't explain. We'll find out later.
I don't need a synopsis here.
Yeah.
And he's coming for Taylor and Doug, because the exit is blocked with hay, and then we see the stoner bodies as well. So he got the stoner dudes.
So the stoners have stoned up the door?
At this point, Doc Holleran wakes up just in time to grab Leslie's scythe hand.
Taylor legit goes, hi, Doc, and then runs. It's just the way she did that. I don't know why I thought that was so funny. It was just she's like, hi, Doc.
It's so close to almost like a Bugs Bunny. Chewing on the carrot.
Yeah.
What's up, Doc?
What's up, Doc? So Taylor and Doug, they run into a stall with an open window, but of course then they look out the window. There's a bunch of pointy things outside the window. Can't really jump out. So Leslie stabs Doc Halloran. Doug says that, he loves Taylor. And again, I'm like, Taylor, fucking move. He's blocking the way so that Leslie can't get to Taylor. And Taylor's just watching instead of leaving. And I'm like, God damn it, Taylor, stop being the stereotype.
Right, but they play the stereotype up really well.
They have to. Yeah. I'm just watching it though, being damn it, no, don't do this.
Yeah, tensions are building here. Leslie smashes Doug into a wall. Taylor gets out, runs to the tool shed. And then this is when they find out poor Todd falls out dead. Taylor grabs an axe and heads to the apple orchard. That's probably not going to work out too well for you. She runs around, finally turns, and sees Leslie. She takes off her jacket, gets all tough, and she says, come get some. So Taylor's ready for the fight. Leslie walks off a bit, and she's just trying to keep an eye on him, but, he's really crafty about his movement. She's really at a disadvantage here. She's playing in his wheelhouse.
And of course, she's running, he's walking, but of course he's still keeping up.
Of course he has cardio.
Yeah, he has to. So he swipes at her, she dodges, and she hits him with the axe, and he's laying on the ground, and she starts to walk away, turns around, grabs the axe, then looks back at him once more, but per usual, he's gone. And I'm like, bitch, you cannot take your eyes off him. Fucking double tap!
Yep, they don't learn that lesson, do they?
Yeah.
And then she runs in until she gets to the building with the cider press. We knew this was coming. Cider press was kind of foreshadowed earlier. Just throws the axe down.
Because that's smart. Let's just throw the axe away.
Goodbye, weapon. And she walks inside. Leslie quickly shows up. He goes in too. Taylor's hiding in the dark, and she hits Leslie with a pulley hook attached to a rope, also known as a block and tackle, and she just charges at him.
And again, you could have had a weapon, but...
Yeah, she's definitely at a disadvantage here, but she's trying anything she can. He gets on top of her, and Leslie starts choking her. She gets his scythe, and she stabs him. So she pushes him under the cider press, and then she starts crushing his head. She's just tweaking that thing as much as she can. He gets the mask off, and we kind of hear some creaking and cracking. You assume you hear his skull is under a lot of pressure at this point. And he says, Taylor, I knew you were the one.
And in such a classic move, she does the final turn while screaming. Just perfection. And now I'm like, okay, so we're kind of double tapping here. So she pours gasoline everywhere. She strikes a max. She throws the axe back into the building at this point. So, when she throws it, though, you can't see the head on it. So I was like, maybe the head came off earlier. But I thought it was on there when she threw it into, the bushes. But, she throws that into there.
And then they're watching the building burn. Doug and Doc Holleran show up behind her alive. So they're okay.
Startling her, thus.
Yep, they definitely freak her out. And Doc Holleran says, he's just a man. implying that he's not like any other supernatural slashers that can keep coming back. No way. We see the fire here, and there's Leslie's kind of whispering a little bit, and
then roll credits.
There we go. Now, during the credits, and this is great, we see what looks like security camera footage of medical examiner's room. We see Leslie's charred up body brought in, and what happens? He sits right up at the very end of the credits, looks at the guy in the room, and the screen cuts to black. Perfect setup for the sequel that has yet to happen, but we really hope it will.
Yeah.
And,
no one saw that coming, him sitting up at the end.
Not at all. No, never. And a fun fact here, the song playing at the end here while they're showing this post-credit scene, or mid-credit scene, is the song Psycho Killer by the Talking Heads, great song, which might be a connection to Reanimator, since there's a scene in it with a poster from the Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense, which also features that same song.
Again, maybe it's a coincidence, but I don't think so.
No.
I don't think there's a single coincidence in this fucking movie.
Yeah, and a good thing to mention is that, they've really been trying to do some other follow-up material for this.
Yeah, they did have a comic series called Before the Mask, and so I'd highly recommend checking that out. There was supposed to be a short that was about 13 minutes that was done. We haven't found it, but if anyone finds it and you send it to us, I'd be really fucking happy.
Or just like anywhere, like if it's on like a paid streaming service, I will get it because I want to see this short. What was the name of that short?
Wait for it.
Wait for it. Yep. And we're waiting for it.
Yes. I wanted to throw this out here. There was 2 other pieces of trivia I found when I was researching this movie that I did not see in the actual movie. So there's supposedly a jacket that Leslie's wearing at one point that's inspired by Akira, but I didn't see anything that to me looked too much like a kid's jacket. It's supposed to say "Stay Awake" on the back, which of course is, you see that drug throughout Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but again, I didn't see that. There's supposed to also be a bottle of "Stay Awake" that's on the mantelpiece. I watched this so many times on my iPad, just like scrolling through trying to find this damn medicine. I can't find it. If anyone finds that screen, just screenshot it and send it to me. I'd be really happy.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I love Akira. And yeah. I didn't see anything that quite really looked like that infamous jacket from Akira.
Yeah,
that red, futuristic, biker-looking jacket. But like, it's not like a Harley biker, like more like a racing jacket.
Yeah. But so
with the big pill on the back.
Yeah.
Just very, very iconic.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, I could see that though, like being a thing that they could have done as like a kind of a nod to it, but again, I didn't find the scene. I went through this multiple times. Also from an interview, I thought I'd throw this out here. This is a direct quote from Nathan Basil. He says, "The film was supposed to end with 2 incensed town people calling for justice. Robert Englund's fiery defense of the documentary crew, and a dramatic court revelation. We didn't have the budget to execute it properly, so the scene only lives on in a trailer with Robert shouting, 'He needs an audience.' He says, it's too bad we had to lose it because he gave a great performance." So I thought that was kind of interesting that there was supposed to be like a further ending, but they just didn't have the funds to make it happen.
That would have been cool to see. But I think they did end it on a really good note.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of references we want to mention. Of course, this movie is streaming right now on Shudder. Wonderful service. Check it out. A lot of good movies on there in addition to this. We used IMDb, Wikipedia, glenechopark.org. Please donate if you can. It's a wonderful park in Maryland. We also reference horrorobsessive.com, fandom.com, several sub-wikis within there, and iconsoffright.com, which was a really great interview with writer David J. Stevie.
Yep. So into our actual review of it. I absolutely loved this movie. I thought it was brilliant in every way, shape, and form. They did this on a complete shoestring budget. I believe they had a Kickstarter for the original, because I saw someone posted online once about their poster that they had gotten from the Kickstarter for the original movie, and I was like, that's badass. I wish I had known. And I just wish they could have made the second one. I mean, I think it would have been amazing. It reminded me a lot of Scream in some ways, where it's very much a love letter to horror. It's very aware of itself. It's aware of the tropes. It plays with them perfectly. And it's just such a unique concept. It's beyond rewatchable. I would rewatch this anytime. Also, for all the Easter eggs, if there's any that we missed, please write in, because I would love to see more Easter eggs throughout this that I missed.
Yeah, there's so much depth. I'm sure there's other things that we just didn't pick up on right away, which is, really great for the rewatchability of this.
Yeah.
And for me, this is the kind of production, it just reminds me why I love horror. No other genre could really pull this off quite like this. And, literally go behind the mask. And it's a brilliant concept. The world building's amazing. Just the very idea and concept of going behind the scenes with someone who's aspiring to be the next one is such a simple idea, yet it's not easy to pull off. There's so many ways this could have gone wrong. There's a lot of ways this could have not been great. You mentioned Scream. Scream's a good flick. I think this is better. I think this does a much better job of things. I mean, granted, I'm more attracted to things with the less slicker production, and this was really down to earth, really grounded, and I think that really went to this movie's favor. There's so many things that could have gone wrong. Not convincing enough characters. The plot could have been really predictable to the point where it's just stupid. Nope, none of that. This is everything I hope for out of a movie like this, and so much more. It's a love letter to the slasher film. Characters are they're believable. Tons of twists and turns. Like you mentioned, all of the Easter eggs. This movie is just filled with references. If you're a horror fan, you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't see this. And even if you don't get most of the references, it's still a good time with a unique premise. I can't praise this enough. It's great. I recommend anybody who's into slasher movies or horror in general, or just kind of like a fun mockumentary even, check this out. It is a good time.
For sure. So with that, let's get into our ratings. Do you want to go first with your overall as a film, the skull rating?
Yep, overall as a film, this is a 5 out of 5. This movie is phenomenal. It's kind of like genre defining in the mockumentary sense, I think. I don't think there are many ways that they could have made this any better, other than if they can get more content, please do so. Which obviously they did in the comic book and the short, which hopefully we find soon. They mentioned the idea was to make this a trilogy of sorts, and they haven't been able to do that yet, but we hope that happens, because it seems like a lot of the folks involved are really on board with doing that. So for me, this is a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, same. I mean, this movie is just perfection to me. I mean, it's just everything you want out of, like, the mockumentary, the love letter to horror, everything about it. 5 out of 5. And based in Maryland, so yay, Maryland.
How do you think on the scary factor?
I'm going to give it a 2. I was not scared. There's a couple minor jump things here and there, but not enough for me to feel... I mean, I didn't feel so scary. Someone who's not into horror could easily watch this and have a great time.
Yeah, I'd say it's a 2 as well for me. It's not scary, and it's not meant to be. That's not what this movie's all about. It's not meant to be a scary film. So, but there's a couple moments too, especially once they drop the documentary thing and kind of is going along with it. There's a couple things that might kind of get you jumping a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So for sound,
I'd give it a 4. I'd say sounds great. You know, they did a really nice job with sound design. There was nothing out of place. The music, which was a lot of homages with the usage of music, was great. Sound effects were great. They're really on point. I'd say a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go 5 out of 5 on it, only because I absolutely love, like you said, there's so much good, like, all the sound is good, there's nothing that sounded bad in it, the music's good, everything just seems in place. I love at the end that there's, like, even a hint to Reanimator. The music itself being some of the Easter eggs, just perfection. So I'm going to give that a 5 out of 5.
Very well done. On to effects. Effects, I would say about a 4 out of 5, I think. You know, it's not a ton of really crazy over-the-top effects in this, because a lot of this was the documentary. When they did get to the point with a lot of effects, it was really well done. I think the way they set up the effects was great. I'd say a 4 out of 5 for me.
I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5, only because I feel that there wasn't really a need... I mean, all the effects are obviously practical effects, which I love practical effects, so that's a plus for me.
That's a big plus for me. That's one of the reasons I gave it a 4 out of 5. Practical effects are great.
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel like it didn't have to do much with effects. There wasn't really a need for effects throughout it, so I feel like I want to give it a 3 just because I don't feel like there was enough to rate too much on, because there were just, and it's not a bad thing, it's just there wasn't a need for much effects throughout it. So
for me, the effects were just so on point.
And I did love his mask, though. The mask that they made for him. I need to make a 3D print of that at some point.
And they didn't overdo it either,
which
was good, because you can really overdo the effects in something like this, and this is where a lot of slashers fail.
Yeah,
is they go too far, and they knew what point to go to.
Yeah. So
Gore Factor.
For gore, I'm going to give it a 3, because it's not super gory, but there's definitely blood in it and stuff like that. If you can't handle even a drop of blood, again, why are you watching horror movies? But besides that, I just feel there wasn't like a lot of blood, but the blood was good, so I'm gonna go with a 3.
I'm going to go with a 2 on the gore factor. You know, like through most of this movie, there's no gore whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because most of it's the documentary pieces. Once you get to the end, where non-documentary parts, there's some gore. It's not overt. There's some blood, and the blood's really well done. But you know, there's definitely some gore factor, and you know, it's a slasher splatter film, so there's a little bit. But I'd say it's about a 2. I mean, if you don't like gore at all, you know, there's going to probably be a few moments towards the end of the film you might want to avert the eyes, but it's not overt or anything like that. So
yeah.
2 for me.
So I think with that, that's everything for this episode. I think that was fun.
Yeah,
I had fun reviewing this movie. I think this was just, again, an absolute blast. So
I had so much fun watching this movie and digging into it a little bit.
yeah,
you know.
digging into this, watching interviews, all this stuff, it was just an utter blast. So
For me, horror's about having fun. For me, a lot of my favorite horror movies are ones that I have fun with. I enjoy them. I like ones that test me psychologically too, but the ones that I'm going to rewatch are the ones like this. And this movie has infinite rewatchability for me. Check it out.
yeah.
Support it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we ever hear of anything like coming up, like a Kickstarter or anything like that,
I know there was an Indiegogo campaign for the short, like 5 years ago, 2017.
Yeah,
4 or 5 years ago, yeah. So
yeah,
unfortunately, we missed that one.
I'm very disappointed we missed that because I would have loved to have thrown some money at this. So yeah, if
Yeah.
we hear anything coming up, we will keep y'all posted. I will post it all over social media. We will discuss it in episodes that have nothing to do with this, just to throw it out there because, my God, I love this movie and I
Yeah, the
would
creators
love to
behind
see
this,
more.
they deserve all the support in the world.
Yeah. So with that, I think we can go ahead and call it a day. So thank you all for listening. This has been We Pod Down Here. I'm Brittany.
And I'm Dan.
Bye. Thank you for listening.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.
Share with your friends and family.
And check out our website at www.weallpoddownhere.com.
Or send us an email at weallpoddownhere@gmail.com.
You can also follow our shenanigans at weallpod on Twitter.
And at weallpoddownhere on Instagram.
And feel free to suggest a movie you want us to review or just something you want to make me uncomfortable with.
Until next time, this has been We All Pod Down Here.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.